Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about Stanley Kubrick's 1956 film The Killing. First off, The Killing is pretty damn cool. As far as the other movies we've covered in Stanley Kubrick's filmography, it is the most action-packed one yet. It's about a group of guys, these criminals, who plot and carry out a heist on this horse betting track. Not everything goes as planned. There's some twists and turns, some surprises, some killing, some murder, betrayal. It's a good story. I don't feel like any time was wasted. Each scene added something to the movie. As the time to the actual heist got closer, you could feel the tension building in the editing, the music choices, and the voiceover that would account the specific time of day.
At 7 that morning, Johnny Clay began what might be the last day of his life. He had timed the trip to the track on half a dozen different occasions, and he knew at just what point he should be at precisely what time.
As always, Stanley Kubrick has some great visual sense and some good camera work, which helps his movies stand out from other film noir movies of that time. The other year I watched The Maltese Falcon, and a lot of the shots and something like that just felt like they were done so obviously on a set in a studio. And there's something that's added to The Killing because Kubrick did basically all of this on location. As always, there's some really well-composed shots throughout this movie. Take, for example, this one. There's other shots like this, or this one, or this. I find it interesting that this is here. You don't see too many Stanley Kubrick whip pan shots where it's like, I think that's part of the fun, action-y feel of this movie. This movie is one of the first notable instances of telling certain sequences of your story out of order. There's this fight scene where this guy is at the bar to help create a distraction for the heist, and we see it from his perspective first. Then 10 minutes later, we see it from this other guy's perspective, where as the distraction is going on, he gets out of the room. Clearly, that was an influence on later directors like Quentin Tarantino, who likes to tell a lot of his stories out of order. The main guy, Johnny Clay, he puts on a mask, kind of creepy-looking clown mask, and that was a big influence on, later on, Christopher Nolan, who in the intro of The Dark Knight during that robbery scene, the mask that the Joker is wearing is basically the exact same mask that Johnny Clay is wearing in this. Now I want to talk about the two main characters of this movie, Johnny Clay and George Petey. Johnny is tall, charismatic, confident, in control, and the ringleader of this whole heist operation, where in comparison, George is short, meek, timid, passive. He plays an important role, but it's a much smaller role in the overall robbery. They're also further distinguished by their relationships with their significant others. For example, Johnny Clay's girlfriend, Faye, is very much in love and devoted to him.
You don't have to sell it to me, Johnny. You know I'll go along with anything you say. I always have, you know, ever since we were kids.
I believe that Faye was written and performed like this intentionally because this even further contrasts the two main characters of Johnny and George. Because when we take a look at George's significant other, his wife, Sherry, we see a much different story.
I'm going to have it, Sherry. Hundreds of thousands, maybe 500,000.
Of course you are, darling. Did you put the right address on the envelope when you sent it to the North Pole?
Pretty much every single line she says back to George is sarcastic, dismissive.
Don't suppose there's anything for dinner.
Well, of course there is, darling. There are all sorts of things. We have steak and asparagus and potatoes.
I don't smell nothing.
Well, that figures, because you're too far away from it.
Too far away from it?
Certainly you don't think I had it all cooked, do you? It's all down the shopping center.
Emasculating, impatient.
They weren't young exactly, and they weren't really old.
She was about my age, you said. Not anymore. Maybe she was when you started telling this story, but not now.
She doesn't have any respect for him.
Well, fix me a drink, George. I think I'm developing some pains myself.
Sherry, can't I ever say anything at all without you joking me about it?
Hurry up with that drink, George. The pains are getting worse.
Another comparison between the George and Johnny characters is that in both of their introductory scenes, their significant others mention 5 years.
Those 5 years you've been away, I know they must have been terrible for you. First time we've been together in 5 years and I'm making speeches.
And when we contrast that with Sherry's 5-year line...
Well, after all, one woman's been married for 5 years and her own husband doesn't trust her. Why, you think more of them than you do of me.
Another difference between these two characters and their relationships...
I'm no good for anybody else. I'm not pretty and I'm not very smart, so please don't leave me alone anymore.
I don't know, that's kind of funny. Compare that to Sherry.
Let's say George and his boys pull his job and George gets his cut. Maybe I could take it away from him, huh?
I think you could.
In the end of this movie, of course, crime doesn't pay, and we see both George and Johnny meet their respective fates. Johnny gets very close to making his getaway at the airport, but his plans fail and he gives up and is apprehended. Did he deserve this ending? Yeah, I think so. He's a career criminal who learned nothing from his 5 years in jail, doesn't care for any of the people that were harmed or killed during this heist, and yeah, he's a pretty cold-blooded dude. So, yeah, he deserved that. George, on the other hand, was shot by Sherry's boyfriend along with the others in the hideout location while they were waiting for Johnny.
Hey, where's the jerk? Where's George?
The jerk's
George survives his gunshot wound long enough to hobble his way back to his place, where he shoots Sherry dead before collapsing himself.
George, you better go on and go. You look terrible.
Did George deserve this fate? I don't think so. He probably did deserve some prison time for being involved in this heist, obviously, but I don't think he deserved to die. He was a fairly normal, nice guy who was very devoted to his wife, who didn't respect him in the least. So I think he was the nicest of all these criminals. It was very clear to me that this movie was a huge influence on another one of my favorite movies, Reservoir Dogs. According to Wikipedia, the most trusted of all sources, Quentin Tarantino has said that this film was an influence on Reservoir Dogs and that he thought of that film as my killing, my take on that type of heist movie.
What the fuck was I talking about?
If you're familiar with Reservoir Dogs or The Killing and watch both back to back, you can really feel the same energy, the same frantic, desperate energy from these criminals and the violent, bloody acts they commit.
Hey, where's the jerk? Where's George?
The jerk's Larry, stop pointing that fucking gun at my dad!
Now, one move out of any one of you, and I'm going to start firing.
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
When all the heist robber guys are planning out their plot, kind of reminds me of the opening shots of Reservoir Dogs, where everyone is sitting at a round table, and it's at their eye level, so you feel like you're there at the table with them. I think that kind of stuff is pretty cool. Parts of The Killing tell the same event from different characters' perspectives, which is pretty much all of Reservoir Dogs. It's like Quentin Tarantino liked that specific idea and just took that to the extreme, carried it throughout his entire movie. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but this is something interesting I noticed, is that in Reservoir Dogs, there are some little, almost throwaway lines that reference luck.
20 years, holy God. What for?
Bad luck.
I guess you can say that again.
The first half of the movie is these guys planning out this heist so meticulously. Everyone has a specific role, but then just random chance and bad luck mess up their whole plan in the second half of the movie. They compound, snowball to the point where this whole heist is just kaput at the end of the story. One thing, this sniper guy, whose job it was to shoot the horse and start the big distraction for the heist, one thing he did not anticipate was encountering this security guard.
No trouble at all. If you need anything else, just talk.
Who's a really nice guy. He's very friendly.
Oh, who you betting on, mister? Anything look good to you?
He wants to talk and chit-chat and share some war stories with the sniper guy.
Sure is a nice day, ain't it? Yes, sir. Didn't figure it would be when I first got up this morning, but it turned out real fine. Kind of funny when you stop to look at it. I brought you some luck, mister. You betting this race, I figure you might need it.
Oh, now look, keep your junk and leave me alone, will you?
In fact, he calls him the N-word.
Something wrong?
You're wrong, Nick. Now be a nice guy and go on about your business.
Sure, boss. Sorry to have bothered you. My mistake.
And just a few minutes later, when he's trying to get away, his tire is flattened by a horseshoe, symbol for good luck. So it's like, this is bad luck. This luck ran out.
Nicky was dead at 4:24.
Another instance of random chance here is that because of the heist, there was a car jam.
Johnny arrived at the meeting place at 7:29, still 15 minutes late.
Johnny was delayed getting there, which meant that Sherry's boyfriend who was plotting to rob George broke in expecting to see the money, but he didn't. And those guys were there and they got into a shootout and that whole thing got messed up. Johnny arrives at the scene, sees a wounded George spilling out into the street, says, screw this, I'm out of here. So he takes off with the money. So making a quick, hasty decision, Johnny goes and buys the biggest suitcase he can find, which may not have been the best suitcase, as we'll soon see. The airline wouldn't let him carry that bag on the plane. They're saying it's too big or too heavy. As Johnny and his girlfriend are waiting on the tarmac, this nice old lady with this little yippy dog loses control of the dog. The dog runs down the tarmac a bit, and the truck that's carrying all the bags, including Johnny's suitcase of the heist money, the dog goes in front of it, the truck swerves to avoid the dog, and then the suitcase falls off, opens, the money just starts flying everywhere, and this is a pretty cool shot. And I love when they cut to Johnny, and you can just see the look of, oh shit, on his face. I did think that was one really cool aspect about the killing, which is just showing how no matter how well you can plan something, expect everything to go smooth like clockwork, it just doesn't.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life.
Now it's time for some random little bits of trivia, interesting facts, and just fun little thoughts I had while watching this movie. First off, the main character in The Killing, Johnny Clay, is played by Sterling Hayden, who would appear in my other favorite Stanley Kubrick movie, which is Dr. Strangelove.
And the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
He really does have that 1950s, 1940s film noir kind of, see?
Red Lightning will undoubtedly be leading in the stretch because that's the way he runs. So he goes down, a couple of other horses pile up on top of him. There'll be plenty of confusion, I can guarantee you that. Suppose by accident you do get picked up. What have you done? You shot a horse. It isn't first-degree murder. In fact, it isn't even murder. In fact, I don't know what it is. But the chances are the best they could get you on would be inciting a riot or shooting horses out of season or something like that.
You like money. You got a great big dollar sign there where most women have a heart. You're a no-good, nosy little tramp. You'd sell out your own mother for a piece of fudge, but you're smart along with it.
Who says that? Sherry tells George, you say one thing and do another. Bit of ironic foreshadowing there.
You say one thing, then you do the opposite.
You really love me, Sherry?
Of course. I'm not greedy, Val. I'm in love with you.
Then later on, George tells her,
maybe you won't be laughing so hard in a few days.
Little bit of foreshadowing there.
George, you better go on and go. You look terrible.
During the bar fight scene, the scene that was told from two different perspectives, look at that guy in the back there in the light-colored suit. That is, in fact, Rodney Dangerfield. This is an early role in his career. This was uncredited.
Boy, that's the story of my life. No respect. No respect.
I thought the scene where this old guy, who, by the way, kind of looks like Lawrence Tierney from Reservoir Dogs, where he had to start a fight to cause a distraction for the heist. I love the way he fights. It's hilarious. And it's just so funny how quickly his shirt comes off. And he's like this round, hairy gorilla man. It's kind of like Shrek or something. That's about all I have to say for Stanley Kubrick's The Killing. If you haven't seen it, I totally recommend this movie, and obviously was a big inspiration for some great movies that came decades later on. If you stayed around this long, thank you, I appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.